I've spent the last 20 years of my life fighting in wars alongside Tier 1 operators, traveling the world, protecting the Secretary of State, and saving countless lives in the ER. And if I could sum up everything that I've learned into 2 life lessons to live a truly epic life, this is it. My name is Seth Capehart, and as mentioned, I'm a former military Spec Ops guy, government special agent, and current ER doc. Now, I focus on passing everything that I've learned over the past 20 years, millions of dollars worth of training to you, completely free. Now imagine knowing the 2 keys of life that not only allow you to live an epic life, but if acted upon, would also allow you to achieve any goal that you could dream of. Whether you want to be a badass warrior, a wolf of Wall Street making millions, or building the body of a god, these 2 simple but not easy rules for life, they're all you need. So stick around until the end and I'll share something with you that I learned recently that completely changed the way that I live my life. You see, the year was 2007 and I had just deployed to my first trip to Iraq. It was winter, just before Christmas. It was cold, damp, and there was a slight cool breeze in the air when I landed. Stepping off the cargo plane, my first thought was, where the hell is all the gunfire and why is it so damn cold? It wasn't but a few days later, I was on my first night raid. It was a helo mission, and it was on a HVT, or a high-value target, and I was attached to another Spec Ops unit as explosive support, and I was fucking stoked. Finally was getting to do what I had spent over 2 years preparing for, flying helos and smoking bad dudes. As we loaded up, I told the other guys that I wanted the door seat, because I was so fucking stoked. They glanced at each other sideways with a slight grin and said, "Sure, buddy." That was a very poor decision that turned into one of the coldest 40 minutes of my life as we flew to our drop site with doors open during the entire flight and that cold, stifling December air. I was so cold when I arrived that I could barely move. I was so stiff. After we established our secure perimeter, we moved out towards our objective. I had my NVGs in place, my rifle at the ready, and, AC/DC, shoot to thrill playing in my head. The route there was through freshly plowed farmland, and what we didn't realize at first was that we had been dropped off about 2 clicks further away than we had originally planned. So after countless stumbles and falls over all these plow lines, we finally arrived at our objective, and we were completely smoked. We actually laid in a ditch for about 5 minutes to recover before we could actually press forward with the mission. We finally moved up to the house, and I was about in the rear third of the stack when we hit the door. Door breach, frags out, stacks of heavily armed operators flood into this room, and what did we find? A house with 2 women and a handful of children who were absolutely terrified and no target to be found. And honestly, this wouldn't be the last time that this happens. We then spent the next 6 hours waiting in a bombed out school building in the cold rain for our convoy to arrive. Not exactly what I expected from my first high-speed mission. Which leads me into my first lesson, and that is to manage your expectations. Unrealistic expectations are the primary cause of all unhappiness in life. Think about it for a second. The reason that you fight with your significant other is almost always due to failed expectations that you had set for them in your own mind. The reason that you're unhappy about most things in life is because something or someone did not live up to the expectations that you had set in your mind. You're pissed about food at a restaurant, expectation failed. Having a bad day, expectations failed. Sad about where you're at in life, expectations failed. Sad when someone dies, expectations failed that person was going to live forever and be part of your life forever. You see, we go through life constantly setting unrealistic expectations of ourselves and of others and of situations. And 9 times out of 10, this is a setup for disappointment. Learning to set expectations appropriately will allow you to live a happier, more successful life. You see, when we temper our expectations and take radical accountability for what happens in our lives, we stop holding others to expectations that we had of ourselves. And instead, we hold ourselves accountable for what happens in our own lives. Stop expecting your spouse to do the dishes and do them yourself, or maybe ask them to do them when they have time. Stop expecting your employees to do the job like you would do it, and instead show them what the job looks like when it's finished. And when they don't complete it correctly, realize that you probably didn't teach them effectively. Stop expecting cool stuff to be just around the corner, and instead learn to enjoy the process without expectations of a payoff. The only expectation you should have are the ones that you set for yourself. And whenever you're unhappy, evaluate how your expectations were misaligned and how you can adjust them moving forward. The next lesson is one that crosses all domains of life and will absolutely change the course of your life if you follow it. You see, there's a famous quote in the Spec Ops community that says, "Failure is not an option." But you see, It actually is. In fact, failure is always an option. When I was going through EOD selection, I had a good buddy named Jared. Jared was a good old boy. One of those guys that would give you the shirt off his back, and he was just raised right. He was athletic as hell, super nice, intelligent, and just an all-around great guy. He had that never quit mentality, and he was absolutely perfect for the Spec Ops community. We met in the months leading up to selection, and we became really good buds. We endured some of the shittiest moments ever together that I've ever been through. And we both classed up selection in January, and it was freezing cold, but we were both crushing it. We had literally spent the last year preparing for this exact moment. Weeks in, we're crushing it, doing great, destined to pass the course. Then came pool week. Pool week is the toughest week in all of selection. It's very similar in that regard to Navy SEALs Hell Week, which you may be more familiar with. Midway through pool week, we lost over half of our class. On the last pool activity of the day, we lost Jared. Not because he quit, not because he did anything wrong, and not because he got hurt, but because his swim buddy dragged him underwater too many times, making the instructor believe that Jared couldn't handle the load. He was pulled from the pool and he was sent to the office for dismissal. Jared never ratted out the other guy, who actually passed the course and never should have been allowed to pass, and he never complained once to anybody. He simply gathered his shit and moved on to what the Navy had in store for him next. Now, someone might look at this and say that Jared failed, but that would be a gross misunderstanding of what failure actually is. You see, 99% of people misunderstand what failure actually is, and I'm going to teach you how to think about failure differently so that you can succeed no matter what you're doing. And I'll explain this to you through the rest of Jared's story. In the ensuing 4 years, Jared spent his time aboard a submarine. He was confined to life underwater with very little room to progress or to train. Yet this never stopped him from chasing the goal that he had set for himself years earlier. Every chance that he got, he continued to train his mind and his body. He continued to petition for another shot at selection. And 4 years later, he was given another shot to prove himself. And so without prolonging this story, Jared breezed through selection the next time, joined the teams where he continues to serve in one of the highest enlisted positions, and he's completed many deployments, leading teams through some of the most unimaginable difficult situations, and he continues to be that same great guy that he always was. So, would you still say that Jared failed? Probably not. And that's because there is no failure unless you quit. Once you really understand and accept this concept, you become absolutely unstoppable. You'll never again fail because all you have to do is make the decision to keep going, no matter how many times life knocks you down, no matter how many setbacks you have. So next time you don't get what you want the first time, think of Jared. Pick yourself up, get your shit together, and keep trying, because there is no failure if you never quit. Now, if you've stuck with me this long, then I have a bonus lesson for you, because I know that you're truly committed to being the best damn version of yourself that you could ever be. But before I reveal it, hit the subscribe button for me so that everyone knows that you're ready to do epic shit. For this one, I'm gonna get straight to the point because I know your time is valuable. This lesson I learned only more recently in life, but it has really revolutionized the way that I approach problems and new situations. How often do you want to start something new, and so you spend countless hours researching it because you want to make sure that it's perfect the first time? You see, I do this a lot. You see, I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I hold myself to really high standards. So I research the shit out of everything I do before I start. I want to make sure that I get it right the first time. But all too often, that turns into never actually finishing anything or even starting anything. Does that sound familiar? You prepare so much that you never actually end up doing anything because you feel that if you just watch one more video or read one more book, that you'll know the secret that will allow you to be perfect. Well, here's the real secret. Action creates clarity, and consistency is king. If you want to get really good at something, then start today and figure shit out along the way. The way I became really good at shooting was not to read about it, to shoot a lot and to make a lot of mistakes. Then I would readjust and be consistent with my training. Same thing in the ER. I didn't start out really good at procedural skills or knowing what to do in every situation. I just acted and learned as I went, making adjustments along the way. You see, experience beats education in 90% of situations. So go out there and act. Just start. So bringing this all home, manage your expectations. Never quitting means you never fail, and action creates clarity. Now go forth and live the epic life you were destined for. If you want to continue learning how to level up in life, watch this other video and subscribe. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them, and let's create a revolution of badass humans. And oh yeah, remember, do hard shit.